Let me show you one of the most exciting tactical games I have ever played. And the reason I'm showing you this game because first of all, I played the game, therefore I know all the details about this tactics, and I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna prove it to you that sometimes there are positions that it's impossible to calculate all the way through unless you are a computer. So there is a combination of themes on the combination, and also there is unexpected shots, unprepared tactics with interesting defense, and if you integrate all this, it's still very difficult to predict the result. And I wanna it's like a lab work. We're gonna go through this game, and I'm not going to show you only details of the combinations. I will also show you how my thinking was conducted and how it should have been conducted, and what I did wrong, what I did right. And this will help you to design combination and to assess the combination the way it should be assessed, and think about the combination the way you should think. Okay, let's go knight f3, knight f6, g3, d5, c4, e6. We're not going to pay much attention to the opening part of it because that's not our goal. Bishop g2, bishop e7, castled, black castled, white with b3, c5, bishop b2, knight c6, e3, b6, knight c3, d takes c, b takes c, bishop b7, d3, rook c8. This is all theoretical position, and we're not going to pay attention, much attention to this part of the game. Queen e2, queen c7, rook a to d1, a6, knight e1. Now, the purpose of this move to push f4 and g4 without making any moves in the center. So white tries to start kingside attack. Knight e1, knight a7, f4, b5, g4, rook b8, g5, knight e8. And now, in order to prevent opening files for black, when they can take b takes c and d takes c, white plays cb, ab, and knight to e4. Now, this is preparation. As you know, tactics, they don't come out of nowhere most of the time. Sometimes they do, though. Very rarely. Here is preparation for white's tactics. Knight to e4, and you see the bishop on b2 is very active, attacking the king side. And also white may want to play rook f3 and rook h3. So white is bringing pieces to the king side. So after knight to e4, rook to d8, knight to f3, bishop to d5, knight to e5, f6 played. Now, f6 move is a critical move in this position. Black sees all of a sudden that white is pumping more and more pieces towards the king side. So they try to find some relief. G takes f, and the knight takes f6. You see, they bring the knight from passive position to f6, but white already has number of pieces aimed to the king side. After knight g5, queen to b6, king to h1. This is a preparation for further attack. So rook goes to g1, and white has to take the possession of g file. Bishop takes g2, queen takes g2, knight to d5, rook f3, bishop takes g5, because knight on g5 was very threatening. White tries to play queen h3, next move, attack on e6 and h7 maybe, or also trying to play rook g1. Bishop takes g5, queen takes g5, and black played queen b7. Okay, this is the critical position I want to stop and talk about. White has absolutely winning position, and this game wouldn't have been too exciting if white played correctly, and I was white. And the correct way to play this position is to go e4 and to stop the tactical shot from black. Knight takes to e3. Now, this would have been the correct way to play. However, after e4, now if black goes knight f6, white goes rook g1, followed by rook h3 and rook g3, and you see all 5 of white's pieces attacking black's king, and black's position is totally hopeless, and game would have ended in a matter of like 3 or 4 moves. However, what happened here is I played rook g1 immediately, which was a terrible blunder. Knight takes e3. I just simply overlooked this move, and here we get to very tactical positions, and I'm going to show you what happened here. That's why this game, thanks to my blunder, game became very interesting. Well, queen h6. Now, white has all different kinds of threats. They can play knight c6, for example, and threaten rook takes g7 to open this file aim. So black plays knight f5, and after queen takes e6, king h8. Now black has beautifully placed knight on f5, and relatively safe king. However, if you notice, white's pieces are very, very dangerously placed. Rook on g1 is strong. Bishop on b2 is very powerful. Knight on e5, needless to say, that is a very dangerous piece. And queen on e6 is good. Only problem white has, and I have to point that it's a big problem. They have rook on f3 pinned. Now, imagine rook wasn't pinned. If white's rook is not pinned, they just can checkmate black in a couple of moves. Knight g6 check, pawn takes, rook h3 check, and after knight h6, rook takes h6 checkmate, because pawn is pinned. But obviously, white cannot do that, because after knight g6 hg, rook cannot move from f3 because rook is pinned. Queen on b7. So what to do here? And here I made a move, and for actually for a long time after this combination was played, it was known like I played everything perfectly, and that was like the brilliant game. However, later analysis showed differently. Well, obviously it was very difficult to refute it on the board. Move was made, rook takes g7. Now after rook takes g7, you can see that black can capture a rook on g7 3 different ways. Now let's look at them all. And the correct move never crossed my mind never crossed my opponent's mind, and never crossed anyone's mind for many, many years after. First of all, let's talk about queen takes g7. Queen takes g7 loses at once because black is getting mated instantly. After knight g6, only move is pawn takes to g6, rook h3 check. You see the queen is not on b7, is not pinning white's rook. White's rook is free. Rook h3 check, knight h6, rook takes h6, checkmate. Obviously, that's not difficult to see, and black did not play queen takes g7. Black, I never thought king takes g7 will be possible, and so is my opponent. He did not even want to calculate this. There is a million discovered checks with a white knight on e5, and stands on diagonal, and black should get mated quickly. That's how we all assumed. That's the difference between humans and computers. We intuitively see that there should be something very powerful for white. And sometimes intuition fails us. If black played king takes g7, black has big advantage, maybe winning here. White does not have very strong continuations here, and they don't have compensation for sacrificed material. King takes g7 is the move that is very difficult to make, very difficult to calculate. It's something you don't want to calculate. It's very counterintuitive, especially when you have a simple move, knight takes to g7, that stops knight g6 check, because as I explained, pawn takes and white's rook on f3 is pinned, attacks the queen at the same time, white's queen, and just takes the rook. That's the move was played by my opponent, and that's the only move I anticipated in this position, and I was right. Natural to me was knight takes g7, and that is the losing move. Most natural, but losing move. And here, actually I'm proud, this was named one of the most brilliant combinations of that year, and also it was in one of the most brilliant combinations from the same theme in Dvoretsky's book. Well, rook takes g7, knight takes g7, but obviously it's not the most brilliant combination, because after king takes g7, black may be winning. Okay, so knight takes g7, and here comes the brilliant move by white. King to g1. Now you see that's what I sacrificed rook, and that's what my calculation was based on. Now after king to g1, you see white is unpinning the rook on f3. And they unpin the rook on f3. This is very difficult to find move. Before you have to see it before you sacrifice it. It's not something that is natural. It's unprepared combination. It's very difficult to see. Now we are threatening checkmate. Black cannot take white's queen, because then it comes double check. King has to move to g8, and knight to h6, checkmate. Well, that's clear. Black cannot take white's queen. The threat is knight g6 check, hg and rook h3 checkmate. Black has to do something real quick. Taking the rook on f3 is not going to help black, because then white plays knight takes f3, and bishop is very powerful, and black's knights, one is pinned, the other is total outsider on a7, and also very weak. That's not going to be good for black. So the natural move, the only natural move for black here is to block the b2 bishop. Black is whole rook up in this position. They have extra rook, so they can afford to give their rook for the bishop. They will still be a piece up. And this what we had on the board. In this position, I had a choice to make. I have two different ways I can play. And I started quickly calculating, and here is what I saw. I can play here forced combination, and I was calculating knight g6 check. I saw that all because it's a long variation. You have to calculate. But the good thing about this variation is every move is forced by black, so it's easy to see. Black takes. Now rook h3 check and knight h5. Now we play queen takes g6 with the idea rook takes h5 checkmate. Notice that rook on d4 is pinned still. Now this was forced with something I could have done. Queen g7, that's the only move black can play here. Rook takes h5 check. King to g8. Queen takes g7 check. This was all calculated and was not played. King takes g7 and rook takes c5. Now you see that rook on d4 is pinned and black is protecting. Black is playing rook takes f4, protecting that rook. Now we play bishop takes d4, rook takes d4, and we get our knight back. Rook c7 check, king g6, rook takes a7, and rook takes d3. This is the forced variation. This is something I calculated, and it's not difficult. It may seem like very long and difficult combination to see. No, it's not, because every move is a straightforward. There are no sub-variations, and this position is the draw. This is drawn position, and at some point, once I blundered the e3 pawn, I thought I may have to go for it. But after a long hesitation, I spent almost all of my remaining time, and I did not do it. Well, here comes the calculation ended. Calculation ended, and we have the position. This is the position we have, and now I can by force get that drawing continuations, which means it's a rook ending where white has an extra pawn, but position is drawn. So I had a choice between that continuation that I just showed and the other continuation, which is bishop takes d4, c takes d, and queen h6. But in this case, white is simply a piece down. White is simply a piece down, but there are some things we are not good enough to calculate. I couldn't see through all the possible outcomes here. But I saw one thing. I said, if I play queen h6, I have a threat of rook h3, I have a threat of knight g6 check, knight on a7 is bad, and I have centralized knight on e5 and very active rook and queen. So I have three pieces attacking well, but I am going to have to play with the piece down for a little bit, for a while. So intuitively, I thought that queen h6, bishop takes d4, and queen h6 is good for me. And that's what I played, turning down the drawing continuation. And that's what I played on queen h6. Now knight g6 is a threat. my opponent quickly played king g8. Now they stopped knight g6 check, and when I played rook h3, attacking the h7 pawn, they played knight f5, feeling good about this position. But I felt very good about my position as well, because I still have these three dominating pieces on the king side. I went queen e6 check, and after king g7, this is the move that practically wins the game. Knight d7 has a terrible threat of knight takes f8, winning material, and then knight on f5 will be hanging. And what can black do here? Black cannot play rook c8, because then we could simply play, I don't know, queen takes f5 even. I don't know, if maybe not queen takes a5, but maybe there should be a variety of continuations we can play. Yeah, maybe queen takes f5, rook c1 check, king f2, and after rook c2 check, maybe even king g3. Well, but in reality, in the game, actually, in this position, I saw the move that wins immediately after rook c8. The move is queen to e5 check. Now this move is total winner. Now black has to play king g8. That's the only move. On king f7, white takes knight on f5 with a check, and on king g6, there's queen f6 checkmate. So king g8, now knight to f6 check. It forces, absolutely forces king to f8. Now, because on king f7, rook takes h7 check, taking the queen. On king f8, knight takes h7 check. And you see that black is getting mated or losing the queen quickly. On king f7, queen takes f5 again. So king g8, knight f6 check, and finally white's rook on h3 makes final statement. Rook h8 check, and on king g7 will be knight e8 with a quick mate on next move by queen f6. Knight e8 is a double check, and if king f7, then rook h7, simply taking the queen on b7. So in the position given here, rook c8 was losing to queen e5 check. Now rook f7, this is, now I didn't see it all when I played bishop takes d4, and I went to position where I'm simply material down, but I have my three pieces big time attacking black's king. Rook f7 is losing as well because of rook takes h7. Now on king takes h7, queen takes f7, and black can resign because on knight g7 they will get knight f6 check and queen takes queen. And on king h6 comes queen f6 check, taking next move black's knight with a check. So for those reasons, the move rook f7 is not acceptable. Now, what else there is? So after knight d7, black played queen c8. Okay, now queen c8, the knight takes f8. Now, what can black do in this position? Black can play queen takes f8 or queen c1 check. Queen takes f8 loses by force and loses quick. You see, all the problems that black is experiencing in this position is because of they have piece outsider that does not participate in this game. Now after rook h5, the game is practically over. Now rook h5, now whatever, I don't know, whatever black can play here, or even queen d7 check wins right away. Rook h5 is a good winning move. Knight e7, rook g5. Now on knight g6, f5. On king h8, queen e5, checkmate. So that loses quickly. So only thing black has is queen c1 check, king f2. Now black has two choices. Queen takes f4 check and queen d2 check, and they both lose by force. Now this is possible to calculate, it's not that difficult. On queen takes f4, white wins after king to e2. Now queen g4 is forced check, rook to f3. Now black has to keep checking, because as soon as they stop checking, the game will be over. Queen g2 check, rook to f2. Again, the only check is queen g4 check, king to d2, queen g5 check, and you see now we can go king to c2, and after knight e3 check, king to b3, and there are no more checks. Actually, the interesting point to notice in the position where black played queen g4 check and white played rook f3, that knight g3 doesn't do anything, because white simply takes the knight and white's queen on e6 protected by f8 knight. So if that it doesn't work, so only other option, black has queen d2 check, then white goes king f3, queen takes d3 check, every move is forced, king g4, knight e3 check, and king g5. And that's the end of black's checks. Now if black plays king takes h6, then white is mating black by force of winning decisive material. Rook h6, now the threat is rook f6 check with a quick checkmate. And after rook h6, black plays king g7, and that's the only way to checkmate. Now rook f6, notice that black still does not have a check. The actually only check they have is h6, then simply rook takes h6, and then is a new mating threat. And in this position, only thing they have queen f5 check, queen takes f5, knight takes f5, and after rook a6, finally black is losing their poor knight on a7 that has never done anything for past 40 moves maybe. So what did we see in this game, and why this game is instructive? Now we see, well, thanks, we wouldn't have seen any of it if I did not blunder the e3 pawn in an earlier stage of the game on move 28. So what we see here, that there was unexpected and unprepared shot, rook sacrifice, that was a little bit hard to notice. Very unexpected move king g1. Now this is not typical combination. This is not typical combination. Very seldom you can see to sacrifice rook for mating attack, and when your opponent accepts the sacrifice, you make quite move with the king. That does not happen. That happens maybe in the fairy tales and or once or twice in your whole chess career. But we saw how unexpected and totally shocking move my opponent could have played, accepting this rook sacrifice on move 31 by taking with a king and exposing their king to the discovered check. So we saw long calculations, long variations, you see how rich the tactics were in this position. And there was shot after shot, but the most importantly, so we had the unexpected shots, 2 or 3 of them. We had a blunder, we had long calculations, and we had to use the intuition when I did not take the draw by going to the long and forced variation. An intuition that being pieced down, I do have enough attacking power to convert this attack into a win. So very instructive, very rich tactically game, and very, very helpful to study this game. I spent a lot of hours, and so are other players spend a lot of time analyzing this game, and only like 15 years later there was notice that king takes g7 would have been good for black in that position when white played rook takes g7. Very instructive game.